So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Joni Parsons, co-creator of Revel 11, along with Monica Smith. Monica, go ahead and give a wave.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you, Monica. We created Revel 11 about 4.5 years ago to have informative, educational, edgy, and fun events and retreats for women. I'm really happy to say our community has grown to over 5,000 women globally, and we're so glad to have you here today. So let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today. I have always been intrigued with Feng Shui. I learned about it many years ago from an interior designer who said that if I implemented some of the ideas of Feng Shui, my home would change. I'm like, that's so interesting. So I tried something this past month, and I recently decided to paint the interior of my house. My boyfriend said to me, "It's fine, Joni. Why are we doing this? Why are you spending the money to do this?" I said, "Because it needs to be freshened up." I also got rid of some clutter, and I'm still working on that, and ordered a couple of pieces of new furniture. Could it be a coincidence that I just got a large surprise check in the mail that I wasn't expecting? We'll learn more about that in a moment. So what does Feng Shui mean? I'm going to read this. Feng Shui is an ancient art and science that was developed over 3,000 years ago in China. The literal translation of Feng means wind and Shui means water. In Chinese culture, wind and water are both associated with good health, and it also means good fortune. It aims to ensure that people live in harmony with their surroundings. And the Chinese have a deep belief in qi, what's otherwise known called energy, that's incorporated into all aspects of their life. So today I am thrilled to introduce Amanda Gibby Peters. She's also been called the Martha Stewart of Feng Shui. I love that title, Amanda. I have her new book here. It is a wealth of information. It's called Simple Shui for Every Day, 365 Ways to Feng Shui Your Life. And I love her quote so much, or one of her quotes of many: "Change your house and your life will change." You are in for a treat today. Welcome, Amanda. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I have like a feast in store for everyone. So
well, a feast is awaiting. I'm so excited to hear your presentation today, and I'll jump off and take it away, Amanda. Thanks for joining.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So I just want to thank the Revel 11 community for letting me come today and share Feng Shui, tell you some tips, get you really excited. I'm going to apologize in advance for the lighting. It is kind of stormy outside, and so, you know, fingers crossed that we don't end up with tornado sirens or anything happening. I was telling the ladies before it would be a first, and it would not surprise me either. Okay, so I am Amanda Gibby Peters. I'm the founder and creator of Simple Shui, which is a modern day mission-driven, love-based practice of Feng Shui. I have been doing this for over, 15 years now, and it's always a treat to teach Feng Shui, to consult people, and to really help people incorporate this wisdom into their lives. So anytime I have an audience, I like to just take care of a little housekeeping before we get into, sink our teeth into what we're here to discuss. And that is so that we're on the same page about Feng Shui. So I'm going to just share a few definitions of Feng Shui, both so that you know where I'm coming from and that we are together as we discuss this, this topic today. And then also just a few misconceptions I want to clear up so that you can go out confidently after this and speak about Feng Shui and you know what you're talking about. All right, so Joni kind of already explained this, but one of the best definitions I know of Feng Shui is just the literal translation, which is Feng Shui, wind, water. And wind represents energy and water represents fortune, okay? So when you are practicing Feng Shui, you are really simply aligning yourself with the energy of fortune. It is that simple. Now, I think that sometimes people hear fortune and they think, ooh, if I do Feng Shui, I'll get some more money, I'll have all this abundance, prosperity. And while fortune like that certainly falls under that umbrella term, what you really want to think about is what is important to me, what is necessary for me to feel like I'm living a good life. And when we have that conversation, oftentimes family, friends, a support network, a good job, access to resource, opportunities, health, well-being, feeling a passion and a purpose in your life, right? All of these things start to come up. So all of that falls under fortune, which means that when you're in pursuit of any of those goals and intentions, you are probably aligned with, if not in the same lane as Feng Shui. All right, so that's the first definition I have. The second one is even simpler, and it is just that your surroundings are always influencing your well-being. And Feng Shui is this body of wisdom, this understanding that acknowledges that, right? I think that we don't quite understand how strong that influence is, right? We spend time journaling, we do our affirmations, maybe we do our meditation in that, but everything that we do is happening in a space. And this isn't as woo as some people like to think it is. Behavioral scientists in the last couple of decades have sort of jumped on board, and their term for this is choice architecture. And essentially what their studies have proven is that the buildings you're in have an influence. They can actually change your brain and your body. Okay, so their flow chart goes something like this, that, you know, the building and the space you're in is influencing how you think. And if any of you have ever done thought work, you know that your thoughts are going to influence your feelings. And once we go there, your feelings are now determining your moods and your behaviors. And those are influencing the decisions that you're making. And those decisions are what drives you to your outcome, your experiences, your quality of life, right? So it's a really fancy flow chart that essentially says the same thing, that your surroundings are always in conversation with and influencing your well-being. So Feng Shui is kind of a big deal, right? Like understanding how to make your space work for you is really a life skill that I think we all deserve. The few misconceptions that I want to clear up quickly. One, there's this idea that Feng Shui is a magic hat trick, right? That if we bring something in our space or we do something, then there's a transaction. Something should happen as a result immediately. And while there is such a thing as like Feng Shui beginner's luck, right? Someone does Feng Shui for the first time and something surprising happens and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm totally into this. Most people who have stayed with this practice will tell you that that's not how it always works. And it's not transactional. It really is an ongoing conversation. However, what Feng Shui does is even better. So let me tell you the 4 things that I've distilled it down to, sort of have been taught and learned over the years that it really is a powerhouse on. 1, it will empower you to know how to cultivate and co-create change in your space. I want you to think that your space is something that's always within your reach. And if you know that changing things around is going to change your life, that means that you are empowered to influence positive change, co-create positive change in your life at any given moment. So it's a very empowering practice. 2, it can protect us. And when I say protect, I don't mean like from the boogeyman, although I have worked with clients who've come out of trauma and we've worked with certain remedies and cures to help make them feel more protected. But in this sense, what I'm talking about is a lot of times when Feng Shui is presented in magazines and, you know, on the socials, people think it has a lot to do with how your furniture is arranged or the things that you bring into your space. And while that is part of it, it is only one slice of the pie. In fact, there's a whole body of Feng Shui that really acknowledges and looks at the way your surroundings are influencing your space, meaning what's happening around your home, and then also the way your home is actually built. Because so many times people will say to me, you know, well, I've done, you know, X, Y, Z, and I'm still having this challenge. And it won't be something that they've done or something that they can physically move around that's causing an issue. It can be just the way that the home is built, right? The way that chi is traveling, or energy, life force, whatever you want to call it, is traveling through the space. And so as a practitioner, I know different remedies that we can put in place that will remove that sliver, if you will. It'll help remove that challenge. And so when I say protect, I mean it helps protect your energy, your livelihood, your wealth, those things that matter, okay? So it empowers, it protects, it mitigates challenges. This is probably the thing that brings people to my doorstep the most, which is, I have tried everything else. I don't know what to do. Maybe my house is cursed, or maybe there's some magic here. Can you just help me? Right? Like, all of the familiar coping skills have stopped working, and people sort of, they've surrendered. They're like, I don't know what to do. Can you help? And what I love so much about Feng Shui is that you learn ways to work. This is a very action-based practice. You learn ways to work with your space so that when you're going through challenges, when you're in certain weather, you don't have to bump up against every sharp edge. You don't have to fall all the way down to the floor. You don't have to stay in the dark. There are things that you can do that are going to help bring solutions and support to, into your life, so that you're able to navigate some of those problems, those challenges, those unexpected hiccups in your life with a little more grace. Okay. And then finally, what it does is Feng Shui really induces our space to serve as stimulus for our ambitions, our desires, our intentions, our needs. So in Feng Shui, it's good to know that it does trigger opportunity. That I can guarantee you. What I can't guarantee people is what that opportunity is going to look like. So sometimes it is so much better than you would expect, and here it comes, and you're like, oh my gosh, I love Feng Shui, sign me up for life. And then other times it looks like work. It looks like things that we've been putting off, right? But really what you're engaging in then is clearing the path, clearing the passage for the things that you want to reach you, right? And so my advice to people when working with Feng Shui is to just understand that the assignment is going to knock, and your only job is to say yes, right? Because you're aligning yourself with that energy of fortune. Okay, so the other misconception I hear a lot, and I'm in Dallas, so I've run into this quite a bit, is I don't believe in Feng Shui. That's anti-religion, that's witchcraft, that's woo, that's just a trend. I've heard all the different excuses. And after 15 years, it's really this simple. I just tell people Feng Shui doesn't need your endorsement. There it is. If you have stuff and you have space, that conversation is already happening around you, right? Think about wind and water. Wind is that unseen energy, water is that seen energy. So this is your stuff, your space, conversation already happening. It does not need you to say, okay, go. So the more empowering question to ask is, what is already working in my favor, and where are there opportunities for improvement? That is such a powerful pivot. Okay. So I've cleared up some of those misconceptions. Hopefully now you can go out in the world and you will better understand and recognize what is really Feng Shui and what maybe is not. Because there are a lot of people out there who know just enough to be dangerous. And oftentimes, they are with a pulpit. Okay. So moving on. So if you take nothing else from today's workshop, and I've got 9 really fabulous tips, there is one exercise that I want you to keep in your back pocket for life, and it's called minding your metaphors. So when I came to Feng Shui, I was a big time skeptic. I did not see how changing my house was going to have anything to do with my life, and I was really resistant to it. I had just moved. I was, fresh out of a master's program, so I was very cerebral, very academic, was like, this is too woo for me. And after a lot of synchronicities and coincidences, I started realizing maybe I shouldn't be such a skeptic. Maybe it would be good to be a student. And when I decided to come to the other side, I collided with a really great definition. There was a practitioner who also happened to be a physicist who said, Feng Shui is the intelligent use of environmental metaphor. It's the intelligent use of environmental metaphor. And my master's was in communication. I'm all about language and words. And I was like, wait, I can get on board with that. And so what I want you to do, and we're not going to share, you don't have to worry about getting called out, but I just want to take you through this because this is a really powerful exercise that you can use anytime that you feel like you need a little zhuzh in your life, like your home's kind of feeling flat. So I want you to think of a space in your home. It could be a room, it could be a corner, it could be a shelf you've curated. I don't care, but just a space that you genuinely love with all your heart. And I want you to describe it. You can just write down a few words on a piece of paper, just, on your phone, or even think them in your head, but just a few words of how that space makes you feel. Okay. I'll give you like 15 seconds. And then I want you to think of a space in your house that you don't love as much. And this can be maybe, a closet that you've been putting off organizing. Maybe it could be a place that hasn't ever felt quite right. Maybe there's stuff that you need to deal with in that space that just nags you. And again, this can be a room, a corner, a closet, it can be a drawer. But just describe in a few words how that makes you feel. Okay, so you have a few words written down. So what I want you to do now is to take the space that you chose out and put I am. So I am all the wonderful, lovely words of the space that you love, and I am all the words that you use for the space that you don't love. And what this is plugging you into is the energy deposits that are happening in your space, right? I said Feng Shui is an opportunity to see what is working well for you and then where there's an opportunity for improvement, right? And so both things can be true. And in those spaces where maybe you described what you didn't love, there is an opportunity. There's some heat there right now for you to change that story based on those words. You can say, well, how do I want to feel? And then you can move into that space with that sort of deliberate intention and action. Okay. So this is a really great way to inform how you want to change things. Listen, we go through all sorts of seasons. Some seasons we're on and we want to be seen and we're doing, and some seasons we want to take it easy. Some seasons we want to go dark for a minute. We just want to be quiet. We want to be with ourselves. And so your space is always going to be changing, and you can use this exercise to really help guide how to change and facilitate your space so that it's supporting you in whatever season you're in. Okay. All right. So exercise out of the way, exercise for life, fantastic. It's one of the first things I did. I still do it today. And so if nothing else, that is your big takeaway. But today's conversation is focusing on really how we cultivate space that feels good to us, right? And what I noticed, so last year in COVID, as you can imagine, I was doing all sorts of workshops and conversations. And what I noticed is that people were spending a lot of time thinking about what they wanted to manifest or call into their lives or attract, but very little effort was spent on how they were going to hold on to those opportunities when they showed up, right? Like they weren't really creating the space for that. And so out of that, I noticed this pattern. It's over years, but last year it was really in focus. I came up with this strategy of, what we want to do is work with our spaces so that not only are we, creating a container for whatever we're calling into our lives, but we're finding ways to cooperate with that energy and then cultivate it so that we don't have to keep remanifesting, right? And so that is kind of where we're going today. And for each of those ideas, like the containing, the cooperating, and cultivating, I've got 3 really great tips for you. Now, when I came up with this workshop originally, I was talking to a lot of people about work from home or creative space or schooling from home. So that's going to be kind of the placeholder I use today. But Feng Shui is very versatile. It's very user friendly. And so you can use these concepts anywhere. You can use them at your front door. You can use them in your bedroom. You can use them in your office. You can use them in the living room. You can really take these concepts and make them work for whatever space you're looking to change, and, you know, align that energy with whatever it is that you want to experience in your life. Okay. So lots to cover. I'm going to try not to talk too quickly. And if you have questions, I promise I'll get to questions at the end, because multitasking is not my bag. All right, so we all know that it's really easy to grab attention, right? We can yell at someone, we can wear something really bright and, you know, bodacious, but holding on to attention can be a little more tricky. And so the three things that, you know, I focus on in terms of containing energy when we've called it our way, holding on to it, getting it to linger and hang out. The first one, you want to designate space. Now, when I was teaching this as a, you know, as a work from home, it was like, you want to designate a work from home, a school from home, or a creative space. Basically, whatever it is you're trying to call into your life, you want to have a landing strip, if you will, like somewhere that it knows to arrive, right? So I think the quote goes, you know, the muses know where to find me, right? Because this space has been designated. Okay. So when you have that, what this is doing for you, a couple things. One, when you designate space, it sends a very strong signal that work, creativity, productivity, abundance, school, whatever it is, happens here. And I know some people are like, but that's boring. I want to move around my space. I like the flexibility of working from home. But our brains really require routine. Like, they really thrive on routine. The really big uptick with designating a space is that you are paying better attention. You don't have all the distractions because you're in a space that's familiar to you. And when you're not distracted, guess what? You are paying better attention to what you're doing. You're going deeper into your work, which means you're going to get better results. So when you're calling something into your life and you've created the space for it, it means that you're giving it your 100%, right? It's not competing with distractions. So I often talk about this in an office, but I'll just use a bedroom for an example. When people tell me that they really want to prioritize a relationship and there's like clutter in there, or there's work in there, or maybe there's the workout equipment, and there are options for moving that stuff out. I'm not talking about people who live in a studio apartment, but there's options for moving that out. Those distractions are competing with whatever your intention is, right? So designating a space not only says, okay, this is where it lands, and this is what the priority is, and I'm allowed to go really deep into this focus, but it also establishes boundaries. And so many people struggle with boundaries. Well, when you reinforce boundaries in your house, you walk out into the world better informed and able to handle holding boundaries, not only holding and honoring your boundaries, but respecting other people's boundaries. Okay. So designating a creative space allows you to know where the muses are going to show up. It gives your brain what it needs, right? It allows you to go deeper into your work because you're not going to be distracted because it's a familiar space. Right? And it really helps to reinforce boundaries. And all of those things are really great at containing whatever it is you're calling into your life. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to face your life. All right. So I joke a lot that this is like a page we pulled from the Mafia Boss playbook, but you know, Feng Shui has been around for thousands of years. So we know that it came from Feng Shui first. But essentially, it gets your brain to sort of visualize what I'm talking about. In Feng Shui, it is a really great strategy to sit in your office or in your bedroom in what we call command. That means that you have a solid wall, ideally, behind your back, and you can see anyone who is entering the space, okay? Now, the wall behind your back represents like this mountain of support. It pulls from the very beginning roots of Feng Shui. And then being able to see the energy that comes in, people, that energy represents opportunity, possibility, potential problems, things that you want to get in front of, right? So as long as you're sitting in command, it means that you're going to have the time to take advantage of, show up fully, or get in front of anything that might be coming down, you know, your way. When we sit with our back to a door, what happens is, I mean, there are a lot of different things that can show up, but a lot of times people say, I didn't know that that was coming, or I didn't have, enough time to respond, or somehow that slipped by me, or I didn't see that coming. Sometimes people who aren't facing, can't see energy coming in, will end up with sort of outdated perspectives. Sometimes they feel out of date themselves. Sometimes they get like really into worry loops, strong worry loops. Like when you're not in command, there are a lot of things that can happen. Now, remember, Feng Shui is not transactional. This isn't something that if you sit with your back to a door for a week, you're doomed. It's not that. But over time, it will have that effect. And the other thing that happens when our back is facing a door is that you're in that path of energy, right? So even though you might not like, hey, I'm not going to get spooked if someone comes up behind me, I'm not that person. Your subconscious doesn't know that. Like instinctually, we're not wired that way. And so you're kind of throttling on like fight or flight. And over time, that can be very inflammatory. That can wear you down and you can feel exhausted. You can feel indifferent. There are ways that shows up that you're not able to make connections immediately to what you're doing day to day, right? Because we're not taught that will have that impact over time. So if you can face your life, fantastic, right? So you're better able to respond to anything, good or bad, coming your way. And if you can't, then here are 3 strategies you can use. Because I know some people are in studio apartments, some people work at a cubicle, some people, you only have so much space in your house and you have to face a wall. So if you face a wall, have a high back chair so that you get that mountain of support. These chairs are called executive chairs. I love that, just for the title, but it also creates that like we've got your back, right? So that any energy coming in is hitting this first. The second thing is you can put a mirror up on your wall if you want to see what's coming behind you. But more importantly, I really encourage my clients to find some sort of image that provides a view into the distance. When we face a wall, a lot of times when we have our desk and we're not in command, we're oftentimes facing a wall. If we face a wall, it can feel like we're hitting a dead end, that we are hitting a wall, that, there's no movement, right? Like all of those metaphors, think about the metaphor exercise, like all of those metaphors really come into play here. By opening up a view, you're giving yourself room to breathe. You're giving yourself room to sort of let your imagination and your creativity roam. Your productivity increases. There's all sorts of win there. So just opening up the space with a picture, fantastic. And then the other thing you can do is you can take that command position, facing your life everywhere you go. So if you go to a restaurant, grab the seat at the table that puts you most in command. If you're in a conference room and no one's sat down yet, grab the seat that puts you most in command. If you're at an interview and they take you into a room and there's a chair that puts you in command better than the others, grab that one. That will change the way that you are seen and the way that the energy is interacting with you. Okay. So those are really easy fixes for anyone who can't, position their office so that they're facing their life. Okay. The third thing in terms of containing is what I call setting the stage. So energy follows the eye. And one of my jobs when I go on a consult is to pay attention. Where does my eye go first when the client opens the door? Where does my eye go first when I walk into a room, like every room? Like, what am I drawn to first? Because that first hit is having that first impression, statement. So if I walk into someone's house and say there's like book bags and, shoes, maybe there's a messy office, they're closing the door, don't want you to see it, that kind of stuff. That is the first impression that I'm getting. And that's also the first impression that energy that's coming into your house is getting. Okay. So that is then the energy that it is traveling through the rest of your home with, right? A lot of times we become so familiar with our spaces that we don't see it. So if this is hard to do, it's great to ask a friend or someone to come over and say, what's the first thing you think of? Just the same as the minding the metaphors exercise. What's the first thing you think of when you walk in? But you can use this however you walk into, like to see what you're seeing in a space. And more specifically, you can use this, say you are someone who wants to be seen as an original, or you want to be seen as bold in the work that you do, or you want to be in more conversation with people. You can use this as a way of what do I want the first impression to be when I walk into this space. So if I want to be seen as bold, am I going to have some oversized piece of art? Am I going to have some really bright colors? Am I going to have some statue or something on a shelf that's just like you cannot ignore, right? Like, what am I going to do to make a bold statement that's going to grab the eye? If I want to be seen as original, do I have something in this space that is original, right? I mean, with Etsy and all of these markets today, it is not hard to cultivate that energy in your space. So think about what it is that you want to embody, what it is you want to experience, what it is you want to create, and then use that setting the stage intentionally. What is it that I can put in my space that will be one of the first things I see that will hold that statement in place? It'll anchor it for me. So that is the energy that I am steeping myself in. Okay. Now, I know sometimes picking things out can be tricky because you've got to really flex a creative muscle. And if you're not used to doing that, it can be intimidating. So here are two other things that you can do. One, this one's pretty simple, straightforward. It's clear the clutter. Everyone knows this one. We can talk all day about clutter. Everyone can tell me every single excuse they have, but I will tell you that at the end of the day, clutter, and what I mean by clutter is anything that you don't love, use, or need, it really just comes down to fear. It's a fear of missing out. It's a fear that you're going to lack some sort of resource. It's, it's a fear of judgment. It's a fear, like there's all sorts of fears that are attached to it. We are very sensory beings, right? We take in information all different ways. And the unfortunate thing with clutter is that it gives off that fear energy. And when fear is contaminating us, there's a lot of study about what it does. Like our brains shrink, we sort of turn in. We're not as open. We're not as receptive. We're not as creative as we could be. So simply clearing the clutter out can be a game changer. And honestly, this is why I think the minimalists and the home edit and Marie Kondo and everyone have this huge success, because it's not just about what things look like when you're done. It is that feeling of, almost refreshment that comes through because you're no longer partnering with fear in your space. Okay. So clear the clutter, very powerful exercise. And then the other thing that you can do is work with your walls. So, what hangs on your walls hangs in your mind. And there are two things that I see a lot. One, the fear of commitment. Moved in, thought I would give it some time to figure out what I want to hang on the wall. And then I never committed. And here we are years later and I still have blank walls. Or I put everything up and I like the way it looked and it's been there for like 7 years and now I haven't changed it because why would I, right? So usually it's one of those two things. So if you're not using your walls, when people don't hang things on the walls, it suggests a fear of commitment. Now, not a big deal. You don't have to use your walls, but I would invite you to look at, are there places in your life? Are there experiences you're wanting to have that fear of commitment could be reinforced in your home and then it's showing up in your life, right? When we work with our walls, listen, it's this opportunity. I joke that it's this opportunity to add the adjectives and adverbs to how we want to feel in our experience and our, in our day-to-day and our life and our outcomes. So if you haven't put up anything on the wall, I would encourage, sort of nudge you to try at least one thing and see what difference it makes. The other side of that is the person who hasn't ever taken anything down. And what happens is it creates what I call dull joy, right? Like it's sort of lost that spark. So, maybe things got hung up and you really liked the way it looked, or all the pictures or art you picked up once upon a time sparked just a lot of energy for you. There's a lot of wattage there. But day in and day out, right, we get super familiar with things and then we stop noticing them and they're not delivering that same wattage. And so here's a missed opportunity to be feeling better in your space. So if this is you, what I recommend for my clients is that they take everything down once a year, put everything in the same room, right? So you're going to move everything to one main area, whatever that is for you. And you're going to let the walls breathe. And it's going to feel naked for a while. It's going to feel a little weird, but you're going to let it breathe for a week. And by the end of the week, it really is going to feel like those coffee beans that you smell to clear your palate at the perfume counter. It's going to feel better. And what's going to feel better is you're going to start having like these new ideas of like, oh, we could move this over here. What if we change this out with this? And you're going to start having ideas that you can't have when everything is sitting there talking to you as it is, right? And in that exchange, moving things around, putting things back differently, you're not only going to revive and resuscitate these things that you once loved, but you're going to feel that revival and that resuscitation yourself, right? It's not that you've outgrown the art. It's not that you've outgrown all the pictures. Some of that might be true, but it's oftentimes that they just need to be in a new space so that we notice them again. There's this great quote, I think it's Wayne Dyer. I won't have it exact, but nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So if you want to see things differently, you need to see things differently, okay? So that's a great way to really work with containing the energy so that the space feels good. Okay, so moving on, I'm looking at time. Okay, so when we want to cooperate with our space, right? So we've got this energy, we're containing it, we've got it lingering, it's feeling good, but now how do we cooperate with it? So I talk about having a room with a view or taking in a view. Now, we've already talked about getting some imagery that lets you see in the distance. Any sort of, nature art, landscape, anything like that is fantastic, especially when you need to shift perspectives. There's a whole study, biophilia or biophilic design, that talks about our love for nature. There's something that really fuels us when we have that imagery around. But having a great view out a window works just as well. And that's not what I'm talking about. So just know that taking in a view can mean that. But what I'm speaking about specifically is what is happening when we walk in through different doors. Okay, so first, doors represent your voice. Doors represent your voice, okay? So at your front door, which in Feng Shui we call the mouth of Qi, this is where all the energy for opportunity, possibility, auspicious luck, well-being, the right timing, synchronicity, all those things enter. And if we open that front door and there are things around the door or the door can't open fully, then right there at the threshold, right there where opportunity comes in, there are already challenges and hurdles and blocks. Right? So to cooperate with energy, you want to always give it clear passage, right? Because it's going to be calling in its reinforcements. And so having that mouth of Qi clear, very important. Making sure it works, making sure the door doesn't stick, making sure it doesn't squeak. All of those things count. They matter. They're little things, they seem like, but they make a big difference. The second door is your bedroom door. Same thing. You want to be able to open that fully. Why? Bedrooms speak to self-prioritization, self-love, self-care. And if you have things blocking that and you're asking for support, you need support and people aren't showing up, you know that your voice is not being fully heard, that there are blocks there. There are hurdles you have to clear. The other thing that I notice a lot, and this is just even from driving around, is, a lot of times people will let their outside landscaping sort of overtake windows. So windows speak to our ability to perceive, to receive, to see things clearly. There's a lot of clarity available, through a window. And when people are like, oh, I'm just letting, the trees and the bushes and the landscape live their best lives, I get it, but there are a lot of reasons that's problematic, and that's a conversation for another day. But most immediately for our conversation today, it's that it's blocking your view. And so you don't see those things coming, right? And again, we're talking about how are we going to really cooperate with this energy? We want to make sure that it feels welcome and it wants to stay, and that it calls more of its likeness into our lives. So just, sort of that Goldilocks situation with outside. You don't have to clear the windows completely, but make sure the sun can dapple through. Make sure things aren't leaning up and scraping the windows, okay? And that you can see out most of the windows, with what you can control. If it's something you can't control, that's none of your business and you don't have to worry about that. All right. And then finally, the last thing in terms of this view is how are things moving in and out of your creative space? And this can be your office, this can be where you spend most of your day, whatever. But you want, when people want to be in the flow, you want to make sure that energy can actually do that, that it's actually flowing through your space, that it's not getting stuck on things, right? That there aren't blocks. So pay attention to that, sort of pathway through your space. When you address that, you will be surprised what actually moves into your view, right? Opportunities, collaborations, things that have been hanging out waiting for you to notice them, and you've just cleared the way so that you can see it, right? So now you can really cooperate with that energy. All right. The next tip I have for you is this idea of creating a balance between sort of our man-made spaces and bringing in mama nature. Okay. So, our spaces, straight lines, perfect edges, corners, it's very exact, right? And then on top of that, we bring in our tech and all our smart features and everything. So it has this very yang or yang energy. And, we're going to talk about yin and yang or yang here in a second, but, there's this duality to it. So in our lives, in our homes, we need that duality. And the counterbalance to all of that energy, that man-made energy, is mama nature, right? Like I joke, she's got all the right curves. She's supple, she's flowy. She celebrates the imperfections. It's about the asymmetry. And there are really easy ways to do this. You don't have to buy anything. That's, I love that. So the first thing is, we've talked about this, having views to nature. So again, your prints or out a window. So we don't need to say anything else about that. The second thing you can do is pay attention to sounds or scents, how you smell, of nature. So your sounds, you can open the window and hear the rain, or you can hear the birds, or if you live near water, you can hear the water, or even hearing the wind, right? All of those things would bring in sounds of nature, or you can bring in a sound machine and mimic it. Your sense of nature can be, fresh cut grass, opening the window so you can smell that, opening the window when it's cold outside and someone has like their fireplace or a fire pit going, you get a little bit of that smoke in the air, right? You can smell that. It can be when things are in bloom and you're smelling that fragrant floral in the air. All of those things bring in the sense of nature, but you can also do this by peeling an orange, zesting a lemon, cutting up a lemon and putting it in your water. You can sprinkle rose petals in your bath, right? So all of these things will bring in the sense of nature, and they're super easy to do. Non-rhythmic movement is great in your space. So again, like everything man-made is so exact, right, and precise. So the counterbalance there is what is unpredictable. If you have a pet, fantastic, because pets are not predictable, right? They dream, they stretch, they yawn, they move, they run, they're all over the place. You can't predict how they're going to do that. So that is a great way to counter that balance. But you can also do this by opening the blinds and watching the sun move across the sky, right? Because you'll see the shadows change. Or you can see the clouds moving out, in the sky. Plants and flowers. Right? If we were to put a time-lapse camera on them, we would see them moving all day, but when we're watching them, it looks like nothing's happening. But even that will bring in that non-rhythmic movement. So it's just a way to counterbalance. I was thinking about this as I was getting ready today. I was like, even jazz music has that unpredictability to it. So I'm going to throw that in. That wasn't on my original list, but we'll just throw that in. The presence of water, right? So taking your baths, having water nearby to drink, having fresh flowers that sit in a vase of water, fantastic. And then anything that is free flowing, your abstract art, your watercolors, your flowing patterns, those are all really great nods to Mother Nature. Your colors, those vibrant colors, are fabulous too. And then any sort of natural materials, and if they're local, even better. Another great way to, again, offset some of that yang energy that our spaces just naturally hold because, they've been built by us. The thing to take away from this is when your space feels alive, know that your well-being is going to thrive. Okay. Like that is a really good thing to do. So if you go into a room and it kind of feels dead, think about some of these things I just talked about and bring them in and see if it doesn't wake up the space. All right, so the last thing under this little category is observing this inhale and exhale of life. So what do I mean by that? Well, going back to that yin yang or yin yang sign, it really is acknowledging that everything is always changing. Everything is dynamic. It's not static. And we don't really understand anything without a juxtaposition, meaning you don't understand how good the sun feels unless you have stood, you've been standing like maybe in a cave, right? Or you've been standing on the side of the mountain that's getting no sun. And then you step out into the sun and it's like, or here in Texas, like when it's summer, the AC is like horrible and all of the, all the stores and that, and you step out into that sun and that sun feels so good. But after a while, that sun's so hot and you want to get back into the AC, right? So it's like not one or the other, both. It's the same thing. Like you don't appreciate a soft bed until you've slept on a hard floor. So understanding that there is this duality to everything, right? There's this always changing. And what I see in so many homes is that people will have an over focus to something, an over focus to work, an over focus to the creativity, an over focus to a process. And nothing is wrong with that in and of itself. But when there is not some sort of ritual to pull things back in order, right? Then we're missing out on that cycle. And again, to cooperate with the energy, we have to live within the cycle. Like that cycle is happening, even if we refuse to participate. So to be more cooperative with the energy and the things we're calling in, we need that. So what does that look like? Well, first and foremost, it's acknowledging work and play and rest in your space. That's something that as a consultant, I look for. Like, do I see that this person is sort of living within balance? It's understanding that, things need to be on and things need to be off, right? So you can be in a season where you are creating and manifesting and actualizing and making things happen. And then you need to be in the season where you can sit back and receive whatever's happening. And sometimes that's really still and it freaks people out. A real easy way to get more comfortable with this is creating a ritual around turning the chaos into order. And so when people have spaces like, say, the messy office or the, artist studio or, the catch-all room, it's creating a ritual around putting things away. Belongings belong somewhere. And by putting things away, we're acknowledging that cycle, right? Chaos, great, but there needs to be order. Play, fantastic, but there needs to be cleanup. And when we acknowledge that cycle and that ritual in our lives, we're a lot more comfortable when it happens, right? So many people get nervous in the seasons of their life where it seems like nothing's happening. But if you make these rituals a part of your life in your home, you're going to be better adaptable when those times happen in your life, right? So this isn't about minimalism. This isn't perfectionism. This isn't about, decluttering. It's just about acknowledging that you can have things out and then things can be put away. It's that inhale, it's the exhale, it's the opening the eyes, it's closing the eyes, right? It's the waking your house up and putting your house to bed. Okay, so those are some of the ways that you can work with honoring and acknowledging that cycle. All right, so now we're going to move into how do we cultivate this energy once it's here, right? Like how do we use this as fertilizer? So the easiest thing to do is to cater to the five senses. And I mean, we could have a whole nother conversation on why this works in Feng Shui. It essentially ties to the five elements. Every sense is related to an element. There's water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. You're made up of all of those. So when you cater to the five senses, essentially what you're doing is you're soothing your subconscious. And there's this really great quote. I heard Jeff Bridges one time say, that when you feel joy, when you experience joy, like all of the good stuff gets through your fear and your tightness and it just flows out of you, right? He said it much more beautifully. I just kind of summarized there. But that's the same thing. When you're catering to the five senses, you are soothing your subconscious so that you can be in the space to work with this energy that you've called and you're cooperating with and do it in a way that you're aligned with it. Okay? You don't have to overthink this. Really simple. Get a glass of water before you sit down for the day. You know, have something soft underneath your feet, maybe on your chair, maybe you have a blanket across your lap. You can light a scented candle. You can, you know, turn on your diffuser. You can have some music playing, and you know, you can have something really beautiful, like maybe some pretty flowers or a really great piece of art, something that catches your eye, right? You're appealing to all the senses, and it just becomes part of your startup every day. And then you're really catering, again, like I said, to the subconscious, sort of loosening up and getting into the groove of whatever it is that you're here to do. All right. The next is make a visual as if statement. If you are in my orbit come New Year, you're going to hear me talk about this. This is one of my favorite suggestions when people ask for New Year Feng Shui. It is this idea of, where do I want to be in 3 to 6 months or a year? And what can I bring into my space now that would be as if I've already accomplished it? Okay. So I've been saying this for years. A couple years ago, I'm learning from Lillian too, and she starts talking about lucky objects. She starts talking about, for those of you who don't know, Lillian too is like a grand dame in Feng Shui. She's, I mean, she's the end all be all. But she was talking about how her clients at the beginning of every year, she makes them get a lucky object. And what this lucky object, it has two requirements. Well, it has one requirement, and then they have to do something else. It has to be noticeably different in the space. It has to be noticeable enough that it changes the chi, right? So you can't play small. And then you have to be willing to release something else. And she swears by, she's done this every year, and it is why she has just continued to grow and grow, you know, successfully. So this as if statement, this lucky object, it's the same thing I run across Cal Newport's book, what is it, Deep Work, a couple of years ago. And he talks about the grand gesture. It's the same thing. It's what can you do that's going to pull you out of your comfort zone and almost become this accountability partner. So an as if statement is something that you can do that suggests you have already accomplished whatever the goal is, and it's going to be in your space. That is a really great way to, if you think about it, fertilize and cultivate this energy that you've called in and grow from it, right? Like really work with it and harvest it. So you don't have to do this right away, but I would say don't give yourself too much time. Think of something and then go for it. And then make this, you know, a yearly thing that you do. And then the last thing I will say in the fun thing is we're going to play with mirrors. So in Feng Shui, mirrors are magic. You know, there's a whole host of ways that we work with them. You know, they're often called like the MVPs or like, you know, aspirin in Feng Shui. And it's just because they have so much versatility. You can use a mirror to double or amplify energy. You can strengthen something. You can change the direction of energy. There's just so many possibilities with the mirror. But I'm going to give you 4 today that are very specific to like the creative process and working with sort of that abundance energy and, you know, what you're here to create and call in. So in general, if you have a creative space or an office and you kind of feel like you get stuck in a rut, a mirror in that room alone will start to activate the energy. Mirrors are always on, right? They're always reflecting something. So that's why they're considered a chi enhancer. That's why they're considered very yang. This is why sometimes they're believed to be not great for a bedroom. That is not true. It's always circumstantial, but because they activate energy, they're really great in your creative and workspaces. So if you don't have a mirror in your space that you work or somewhere that you really want to kind of, you know, fire up, you can add that. If you're someone who feels like you're just not getting as much done, you can hang a mirror to one side of you where you work. Okay. It needs to take in your head and your shoulders. And what that's going to do is it's really going to like enhance your confidence and your creativity. And it's going to strengthen whatever it is you're needing to follow through on, whatever it is you're trying to, you know, produce. Okay. So that could be work. It could be a book. It could be a creative project. It could be coming up with a life plan, you know, but you can have a mirror to the side of you. If you feel like you're in a creative rut or block, you can hang a mirror on either side of you. Okay. And again, head and shoulders need to be in, and you can hang these on the walls, you know, or you can set up a, you know, temporary station during the day. I've seen people do all sorts of things. But what's happening here is now you're in the middle of these mirrors going back and forth. And as you can imagine, it's very energizing. And so that's a great way to pull yourself out of a funk, out of a rut, you know, if you've got writer's block, any of that. And then the last thing I will say is if you feel like you need to make like some big financial turnaround, maybe you're not where you want to be with your work or just with prosperity in general, you can hang a mirror in front of you where you work. And you need to be able to see yourself. But that will help kind of start to stimulate that financial turnaround. Okay. So let me just revisit one thing that I said at the beginning, so everyone is in the know. When you work with mirrors, and anything you do in Feng Shui is going to trigger an opportunity. So just know that when you work with mirrors, they do trigger change, and you want to be ready for it. Last year, I had so many people who reached out because they started doing a lot of things and it was too much and they needed help reverse engineering, you know? So if you hang a mirror, just be ready for whatever's going to show up because it works. It definitely works. Okay, so I want to make sure that we have a couple minutes for questions, but let me just wrap this up so that I send you out with your suggestions in good faith and you know what to do. The best way to approach Feng Shui is to not treat this as a to-do list because you are, in fact, you know, influencing and doctoring energy. So working with 1 to 2 things at a time is going to be a lot more manageable for you. Remember, when you trigger change, you trigger opportunity, you want to be able to show up, whatever that assignment is. And if you do too many things, it can feel overwhelming and it can kind of feel like a mess. But the other really great benefit of doing 1 to 2 things is that when you make a change and you get that vibrational feedback, you get that validation that it worked, it has moved from some suggestion you heard from a workshop to something that you now know personally works, which means that you will be able to work with it again and again and again. And as a steward of this wisdom, that is what I want for you. I want you to be able to take these suggestions and have them for the rest of your life. The other really, really fabulous side effect of doing 1 to 2 things at a time is that as your energy changes, because you're changing things in your space, you're able to come back to a few more options from that improved place. And your personal chi is always going to mix into whatever you're doing. So every time your house gets a little better, you get a little better. And so it's like you're climbing this ladder together. So take your time, go with whatever resonates the most right now, like 1 to 2 things, and then come back. And I promise you, when you look back in 6 months, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much has changed. Okay. So that's what I have. What are the questions? Hit me up. Pick me clean.
Amanda, that was fantastic. I am so energized, I have to say, and I can't wait to get home after my little vacation here and get to work slowly and intentionally, of course. A couple of questions. Somebody said that they like blank walls, and then they also said that their partner had different tastes. Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Usually, if you are patient enough, you can find a middle ground, right? So, you know, you don't have to cover all the walls. This isn't about, you know, this isn't maximalism or minimalism, but it's like, is there an opportunity here? Well, first of all, is there something that we want to experience together that we could find some sort of metaphor that matches for both of us? Like, really, it's about getting that buy-in and that cooperation and trying it out. One thing, trying it out. Because here's the thing, like when something changes, you don't need to talk to me anymore. Now you're going to be way more motivated. So that's
right. Okay, another quick question. So you know how people take off their shoes when they come in the door and then they just kind of put it off to the side? You mentioned that it's not good to have anything behind the door. So what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I would say that you want to make sure that your door opens as fully as possible. If there's another space, you know, to have that like shoe collection, do that. And if you can't, then maybe when it's not in use, maybe you can stack it up, right? Like you can turn it up on the side so the thing can open. You know, in Feng Shui, it's just the mouth of qi, that front door is so important. So if there's another option, work with that. And if you absolutely can't, then just when you are going through times where you feel like you're not being heard, consider moving that somewhere else and just make it a temporary fix.
I love that. I'm going to make that change as well. So here is your book. I love today. You're going to love this book. There's so many tips in here. In fact, 365 to be exact. I've read already more than a quarter of it, and I have to tell you that it's been so insightful and so interesting that I know you'll enjoy it as well. Here you are.
Thank you.
With that, Amanda, thank you so much. You're so energetic and so lovely. I can't thank you enough. And I know all of our community says thank you as well. I'm going to toss it over to Monica, who will tell you about a few fabulous events that are coming up. Monica.
Thank you.